Because one of the biggest signs that you actually are in alignment is that your work does feel easier. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Quiet Leaders Podcast. I'm Molly Maris, and today I want to talk about how work should not feel like work if you're aligned. Now, this does not mean that every single task in your business is going to feel light and effortless all the time. It does not mean you never have hard days, and it also does not mean you never get stretched or challenged. What it does mean is that the core of your work, the way you serve, the role you play, the kinds of clients you support, the problems you solve, should all feel natural. It should feel like you. It should feel like something that you're meant to be doing. And I think this is especially important for us quiet leaders, integrators, operators, OBMs, and those behind the scenes support professionals, because so many of us have been taught that work has to feel heavy in order to be valuable. That if something comes naturally to us, it must not be worth much. That if it feels easy, maybe we're not working hard enough. And today I want to challenge that, because one of the biggest signs that you actually are in alignment is that your work does feel easier. And not because it's insignificant, not because it lacks value, but because it lives in your zone of genius. That is the difference. So there was a conversation recently that I had inside one of my coaching calls where we were talking about strategic planning sessions. And one of the women said something that I think many people feel. She was talking about how holding space, asking good questions, and helping somebody get clarity, all of that came so naturally to her that it almost didn't feel like work. And because it felt so natural, she started questioning whether what she was providing was enough. Now, maybe you've also felt that too, or maybe you've had moments where you have helped a client, say, untangle something in 20 minutes that they had been working on for months, or maybe you were able to spot a gap, simplify that problem, or create a plan so quickly that part of you thought, wait, this was too easy. Should I actually be doing more? But that is the exact trap. And we have to stop assuming that ease means low value. Sometimes ease is evidence of alignment. Sometimes the very thing that feels obvious to you is the thing that someone else has been desperately needing support with. And that's why your work matters. And I think a lot of behind the scenes people, we tend to over deliver because we don't trust the value of what comes naturally to us. And instead we start thinking, well, if asking the questions feels easy, if seeing the solution feels easy, if organizing the chaos feels easy, then I need to be adding more. I need to give them more documents, more strategy, more ideas, more time, more access. But the fact is, the transformation is often happening long before all of that extra effort. And sometimes the most valuable thing that we can do is just hold that space for our clients, ask the right questions, and reflect back what we're hearing from them, and helping them see what they could not see on their own. That is the work, you guys. That is leadership. That is value. And if you're aligned, it often won't feel as heavy as you think it should. I also think alignment shows up in the kind of work that you no longer want to do. Now, this is a big one because sometimes we think alignment is only about finding the right work, but it's also about noticing what has become misaligned. I was talking with someone recently who owns a business. They own a brick and mortar business, and she had still been spending time in the business doing the actual service delivery. And she said, I just can't make myself go in and do it anymore. Now, She wasn't being lazy. It wasn't a discipline problem. This was misalignment. And she had outgrown the role she was trying to force herself into. And she realized she was no longer meant to be the one doing those day-to-day tasks or working in the business. And instead, she was meant to be leading at a higher level, thinking bigger, casting that vision, making decisions, growing the business. And this really matters because so many women make themselves wrong for being resistant to work that they are simply no longer aligned with. Often, I usually can tell when I'm no longer aligned with something if it completely drains my energy or if I have this really heavy resistance to doing it. So those are two key ways that I can tell if I am no longer aligned. But also on the other side of that, if I feel energized after doing something, then I know I'm doing the right work. So a lot of times we tell ourselves like, oh, we need to be more grateful or more motivated or more disciplined, more productive. But sometimes the actual answer is that we've simply outgrown this role or this task that we've been doing. And we're trying to stay in a version of our business or version of ourselves that no longer fits where we are now. And of course, that can feel really heavy. And of course, that can definitely create some resentment. And as I said, this can definitely drain you. And that resentment is often a signal. And when it starts to creep in, it usually means that something is out of alignment. Now, maybe you're doing too much that isn't yours to do. Maybe you're in a role you've outgrown. Maybe you're supporting clients who are no longer a fit for you. Maybe your business model no longer matches the life that you want. And maybe you've built something that looks good on paper, but doesn't actually feel good to live inside. That's why alignment has to include both your business and your life. Now, I always say we take this holistic approach because we don't want to create a successful business that does not allow us to live the life we want. So instead, we don't want to just be asking, what revenue goal do I want? It's also, how do I want my days to feel? How do I want to spend my time? What kind of support do I want to provide? What kind of schedule or what do I want my schedule to look like? What am I available for in this season? And what am I no longer available for? Success without the alignment piece is always going to make things feel heavier than they need to be. And this is why getting that clarity does matter. When people are overwhelmed in a business, they usually think the problem is time. But actually, the problem is lack of clarity because they don't know where they're going. They don't know what actually matters. They don't know what needs to come off their plate. They don't know what role they should be playing anymore. They don't know what support that they actually need. So they stay stuck in motion. They're busy, but they're unclear. They're working, but misaligned. And they're producing, but they're feeling that energy drain. They're feeling depleted. And that's why getting out of the day-to-day is so powerful. Because even in the work that I do through strategic planning sessions, the magic is often not in some wildly complex strategy. It's simply helping someone slow down enough to ask, where do I actually want to go? What is happening right now? What is no longer working? What is the real gap here? What would make this feel simpler? What support do I really need? Now, this kind of clarity can create some big change for you. And once you know what's actually misaligned, you can do something about it. You can restructure, you can delegate, you can simplify, you can change the offer, you can adjust the role, you can release the task, you can stop forcing what isn't meant for you anymore. And when you do, work starts to feel different. It's not perfect, but it's cleaner, it's lighter, it's more natural, more like yourself. Now, I think one of the most freeing beliefs that you can adopt is that if my work feels easy, that does not diminish the value. It confirms I'm operating in alignment. Now, this is a key shift that I want you guys to take from this, because the goal is not to build a business where everything feels so hard so you can prove yourself. Instead, the goal is to build a business where your strengths are being used as well, where your gifts are being honored, where your role matches your capacity, where your clients value what you naturally do best, and where your work supports your life instead of constantly fighting against it. That is what alignment looks like. And for the quiet leaders listening, just because your brilliance is calm does not mean that it is not valuable, that it's small. And just because your leadership is subtle also does not make it less powerful. And just because your work feels natural to you does not mean it is incredibly valuable. In fact, that may be the very reason that you are meant to do it. So if you've been questioning yourself because your work feels too easy, or maybe you've been over-delivering because you don't trust the simplicity of your gift, or if you've been feeling resentment and wondering what the heck's wrong with you, or if you've been trying to force yourself to stay in roles that you've already outgrown, I want this to be your reminder. Ease can be a sign of alignment. Resentment can be a sign of misalignment. And clarity is often the bridge between the two. So I want you to ask yourself, what part of my work feels natural and light? What part feels heavy and forced? Where am I aligned? Where am I no longer aligned? And what would shift if I trusted that ease does not mean less value? Now, again, that is the work. That is the awareness. And that is often the beginning of building a business that actually feels really, really good to lead. Now, thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Quiet Leaders Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, I would love for you to share it with another quiet leader, integrator, or behind the scenes operator who needs this reminder. And if you're ready to step into that 5 to 8K per month business with just 2 to 3 clients, you can book a call using the link in the show notes. I would absolutely love to support you in building a business that feels aligned, sustainable, and profitable. I will see you in the next episode.